as well.
Be on your fucking toes.
And we're good.
Welcome back to Hoops Lounge. We're the show that's always hurting on the inside, like Steven Adams' groin. My name is Marc Griffin, a.k.a. Montreal Mark. I'm joined by the usual suspects, Sporting Phil Boileau, Justin Rowan, Cavs Canada. Justin, let's get into this quickly. Explain to me in 24 seconds or less why Uncle Drew is a better point guard than Kyle Lowry.
Man, you're putting me on the spot. When it comes to Kyrie, I just think he's got an incredible elite skill, and that's his ability to handle the ball, and he's a far better shooter. So while Kyle Lowry is a great defensive point guard in that, you see in a head-to-head matchup, that individual defense, it didn't slow down Irving. Irving outproduced him. I just think Kyrie has those elite skills, whereas Lowry just has a very well-rounded game. So that's why I give Kyrie the edge.
Phil, what are these two guys' biggest weaknesses?
I'm going to say both sides, a little bit of defense. I think they're both playing better than expected, but I think Lowry being a small guy, that kind of hurts him. I mean, he's small and bodies up, and I think Kyrie obviously puts the emphasis a little bit more on offense. It's team defense. But I also think they're both a little bit more score first point guards, and on teams that maybe you need to create a little bit more offense. I know, I know it's where the NBA is going with your Currys and your Westbrooks, but these guys are also averaging like 8-10 assists, right? So when you're more like the 5-6 like these guys are, that's what hurts me when you're playing point guard.
Right.
I hate hypotheticals, but Justin, if these guys switched, Travolta, Nick Cage, faces with each other, switch teams, which guy's better off?
I think it would hurt Lowry. I think it hurts both teams and both players to an extent. I think Kyrie's obviously more capable of putting up numbers. And as Phil mentioned, when Kyrie actually functions as the point guard playing on ball without LeBron, he's actually in the top 10 for point guards in assist percentage. How many of his possessions end in an assist? I think Lowry would struggle playing off ball instead of being the primary ball handler. And Kyrie, as good as he is, he's in his age 23 season. He doesn't have the maturity, the poise, and the vision that Lowry has in terms of running a team just yet. So I think Kyrie would put up big raw numbers, but the overall impact would hurt both teams.
Phil, last question. Game 7, the NBA Finals. Who would you rather have as your point guard right now?
Kyle Lowry. I think if it's this year, I'm picking Kyle Lowry. It's kind of funny for Justin's question. I think if Cleveland had Lowry, I slightly think they'd be at a slight advantage for this year. Even though Kyrie brings a lot, I think just that maturity. But Game 7 this year, I'm picking Lowry. That probably wanes in about a year and a half.
Okay, speaking of point guards, shout out to Ricky Rubio and the Rubio family. La Pistola lost his mom this week. One of the bright young stars of the NBA and a great kid all around. So we're pulling for you, Ricky. Moving on, Mike D'Antoni has been signed as coach as the Houston Rockets. Phil, what's one reason why this will actually work?
Because miraculously, James Harden will become Steve Nash 2.0, play point guard, and actually involve his teammates. I'm lying, of course. I have some doubts that this is actually going to work out, only because I don't think Harden's going to do that. But I think they're banking on saying, you know what, we have Harden. We see how he's not capable of playing with others. Let's put him in a system where it's all about him. And I really think he's going to play point guard for this team next year.
Wow. Justin, who do you think is going to benefit most on that Rockets roster from this?
Dwight Howard, because it's going to get him out of that situation. And I think him leaving, going somewhere else, is going to have a big impact on his career. You just know he's not going to be playing with D'Antoni again after what they went through together in LA. So he's gone. Man, it's tough to say who's going to benefit. I think James Harden's going to be putting up big numbers. Maybe if you're just looking at raw numbers, he might be in the MVP discussion again.
Mike Beasley.
They have so many roster decisions that you don't know what this team's going to look like next year. So I'm expecting Daryl Morey to kind of go mad scientist there. But I think James Harden's going to put up big numbers in the D'Antoni system.
Mm-hmm. I think the crux of this all is that James actually buys into whatever D'Antoni's selling. Phil, what do you think's the crux?
I don't know, man. Honestly, this is one of those things that I think is going to work semi-well if it works out well, and I have no faith that it actually will. I think the team, as Justin was alluding to, I don't think the guys involved. I think Montehunis has a decent chance in this system as maybe as a center and play some shot blockers around him with his passing ability, but I don't think they have the roster to play D'Antoni ball right now. I don't think they have enough outside shooters. I think Daryl Morey is going to have some work cut out for him. So while it's a big name and it's change, I don't think it's the right call. That's just my gut feeling.
Right.
Justin, in terms of the right call, why didn't D'Antoni work out in LA and New York?
It was tough. I mean, in New York, Carmelo Anthony, he just couldn't convince Carmelo Anthony that bully ball was not the best way to play. While Melo bought in some aspects, that just did not mesh. LA's tough because you had Steve Nash there, but he wasn't himself.
Yeah, he's broken
Nash
down.
Nash was really going to be counted on to make that situation work, to get all of those personalities involved. And when that wasn't there, you just had an old, aging roster that never quite clicked. Dwight Howard wasn't being used the way he should. And part of that was also his back injuries. So for a multitude of reasons, it just didn't click. You need a lot of luck. You need perfect timing for things to work out in the NBA, and they just didn't have that.
Yeah, and I'm just remembering now, D'Antoni basically inherited the assistant coaches of the previous coach, so it wasn't exactly the ideal situation for him to be in. Got to mention Kawhi Leonard, first team All-NBA this year, wasn't even an All-Star last year. That might be an Ilias historic stat right there. Moving on, at a recent press conference, Russell Westbrook was asked if Steph Curry is an underrated defender, at which he laughed. Phil, was it advantageous for him to laugh at this type of statement?
I mean, I thought it was kind of interesting how in Game 5 we actually saw Steph Curry play some really decent defense, even on Kevin Durant getting some nice steals, and I think he's a system defender. As Justin and I have spoken about a lot of times, Justin's schooling me as he always does. The point guard defense isn't what it always gets chalked up to be, and sometimes a little bit more about the team defense. And I think he understands that perfectly well. So is he an elite individual one-on-one defender who can stay in front of Russell Westbrook? Well, let's just say unicorns don't exist. So it doesn't matter,
nobody
right?
can do that.
Right?
Right.
So
and to build off of you there, Phil, Russell Westbrook with Steph Curry as the primary defender in this series, shooting 32%, with everyone else covering him, 44%. So Curry's doing a good job. And part of that's because Curry's playing with Draymond Green. He's playing with Andrew Bogut, Iguodala a lot. So he funnels them to that help defense, which is what point guard defense is really about. He fights through screens. He funnels them to help. And it's a team effort to stop these elite point guards or to try to slow them down. So while one-on-one in space, is Curry going to stop Westbrook? No. But he's a good team defender, and he's a good plus defender overall.
Let's switch to the offensive end for these two guys. I mean, I kind of attribute Russ to a hurricane. He just kind of does a million things all at once. And Steph is, absolutely lethal from 35 feet out, and the defense gravitates towards him. Phil, who would you rather have offensively?
Listen, to me, it depends what version of Russell Westbrook you're getting on that night. Is he I'm the point guard, I'm the best player on the court, I'm going to attack and take brutally poor decision shots, take way too many threes, even though I shoot a low percentage? If you're getting that Westbrook, I'm taking Curry every time, just because he manages the team a little bit better and his ability to shoot. But at top game, I don't know, like if we're talking, they're both, like if we're seeing point guard Russell Westbrook, that guy, when he's on, his heat check meter to me is a bit higher than Steph. And I know I'm gonna need a lot of crow for this because Steph can drop a lot of points too. But when we're talking about steals, rebounds at the point guard position, when we're talking about deflections, when we're talking about like more than just scoring, I I think Russ has a tiny bit higher ceiling, which gets overshadowed because of the splash that all those threes get.
Justin, here's an interesting kind of parallel between their careers. Both had a lot of injuries early on. Russell had 3 or 4 knee surgeries, Steph the ankles.
Well, that was a little more recent for Russ, right?
Yeah.
Like he hadn't missed a game since high school, and then he had the bad luck recently.
Yeah. Who do you think is going to have long-term more health? I mean, Russ is just relentless offensively.
I can't see Westbrook's body holding up the same way as Curry's. I mean, if Curry has a recurring injury, we don't know how serious this knee thing is. That might be an issue. Russ doesn't seem to have any recurring injuries right now, which is big for him. But that style of play just is taxing on you. And for someone that doesn't have an outside shot, that's a little turnover prone at times, if that athleticism goes and he starts getting more injuries, I just don't think his game translates as well.
Well, that's Antoni McDyess at that point. If you guys remember back to the 90s, like the power forward, who just everything was predicated upon his being a 6'9" super athlete. Yeah, McDyess shout out. But yeah, no, I totally agree with what Justin's saying there.
And Phil, just to go back to what you said before, Curry led the league in steals this season, so he gives you more than shooting as well. I think Curry's just the more devastating player, and I like shooting from the point guard position. Westbrook's a 29% shooter.
I think Westbrook's more disruptive. Like I agree, Curry probably gets a few more steals, but like being that hurricane that Marc was talking about, I think he just makes people a little bit more nervous. Although we're talking about like elite players, right? That's
gambling versus good defense. Like I think Westbrook plays a little bit of that Rondo defense, and I'm not sure that's the most effective way to play.
The one thing I'll say about Westbrook this year, at least these last couple months, is that he seems to have a willingness and an ability to make teammates better offensively that I have not really seen from him in the past. So I still give it to Steph, but props to Russ. I think he's been maturing as a player at age 27. You know, he seems like he's 23, but he's 27.
As long as we see point guard Russ, I agree.
Yes, as long as that guy's out there, these guys have a shot. Moving on, I'm going to give a shout out to Gord Downie, one of the best Canadian artists of all time. Basically, Steve Nash has had a career that I would say has been tragically hip. And by hip, I'm talking about Robert Horry hip checking him into the sidelines. Let's talk 7 seconds or less. Justin, let's start with that series. I mean, 2007, Game 4. I think it was a 2-1 series. Amadi Stoudemire and a very thin Boris Diaw ran onto the court. What do you think? I mean, was this a historic, monumental moment in NBA history?
It wasn't a 2-1 series. That was in Game 6, and those guys got suspended for the decisive 7th game. And that ended up being a close game, too. If Amari Stoudemire and Boris Diaw aren't suspended, the Phoenix Suns and Steve Nash win an NBA championship because they would beat the Cavaliers in the next round. Even the Spurs have come out and said that if those guys were in that game, they win that game and they win the championship, which would completely change how we look at the 7 seconds or less Suns, how we look at DAntoni, and really that team laid the groundwork for the Golden State Warriors and what they've been able to do recently. Boris Diaw played that Draymond Green role, space and pace. It's everything that the modern NBA is about.
Shawn Marion
has been taken from there. Yeah, Shawn Marion as well, the original small ball four.
Raja Bell, 3-and-D.
Yeah.
A lot of those guys, same play. That was brutal. And I can't believe the NBA didn't actually go back and say like, listen, I get it. Their point guard got wrecked into the stands. They didn't do anything. They just walked away. I get it. But like, maybe say you miss one game out of the next series or something, but as the NBA, you're trying to put the best product forward in terms of entertainment. You can't say that sitting that version of Amari Stoudemire, who was arguably the most entertaining big in the game at that point, him and KG maybe, was like, you're sitting him and Boris Diaw. Exactly. What Justin said makes tons of sense. They would have been there. And you know what? For the NBA, having Steve Nash as your MVP and going to the finals, like that's that generation's version of what Steph Curry's doing right now, right? He's that guy that 6'3", kind of like not overly big, that a lot of players can be like, oh, I can be like him. You know, there's a lot of guys like that. And I think the NBA actually would have benefited. I mean, I wouldn't want to take the ring away from Timmy Duncan to give any reason to pick Kobe over Duncan. But, yeah, it was sad.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it was game 4, but we'll check afterwards. Just as it says game 6. I remember the game afterwards where they played hurt, and they're like basically the wounded cat. Probably one of the best basketball games of my life. Steve played out of his mind. And you also have to remember in that series, Steve got the bloody nose in game 1. And Greg Popovich was the guy who said, let him play. Let him play. And they had to take him out of the game. You mentioned, obviously, the Steve Nash to Steph Curry comparison. A lot of comparisons there. They were both guys who played at smaller schools, didn't really get recruited, kind of very much outliers in the NBA. But here's an interesting comparison. What about Draymond Green to Shawn Marion? Shawn Marion was guarding Tony Parker in that series. Either one of you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love Shawn Marion. I mean, from those, like, I'm still pissed they let go of Joe Johnson. Like from the moment they put together that team, when they had Steve Nash, Joe Johnson, Shawn Marion, Amari Stoudemire, I was like, man, if you keep these guys together, it's over. Yeah. But being specific to Shawn Marion, I mean, apart from one of the possibly ugliest shots in NBA history, or being maybe a top 10 contender, you know, his ability, as you said, to not only guard the 1 through, even in today's NBA, he could probably guard some 5, because he was guarding bigger guys in that generation. He was hitting corner threes. He rarely took poor shots. Great pick and roll guy. Great defender on every level. And let's not forget, he had gaudy rebounding numbers, steals, and block numbers from what was a small forward, power forward position. And he was, I would almost say, outside of what Draymond brings on an emotional leadership level, total talent, I actually preferred what Marion brought than Draymond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Shawn Marion's a future Hall of Famer. Like, he should be a future Hall of Famer. Not just for his stats, which are borderline Hall of Fame worthy, but the way he changed the game, his influence and his impact on the game, the way that he played as a small ball 4, I think that's enough to get him some serious consideration.
There was a movie a few years back called Tucker about this guy in the auto industry who invented a car in the 50s that was way ahead of its time. So basically all the other auto people in the industry got rid of him. They were scared of how different and how vastly ahead of the curve it was, and basically got shunned from the industry. I think that's Mike D'Antoni and what he did with 7 seconds or less. I mean, like you guys mentioned, the game today, I mean, the Spurs, Golden State, OKC, all these teams have so much influence on what, Mike and Steve and all these guys did in an era where no one else was doing what they did. And it's nice to see Mike D'Antoni finally back head coaching a game again, a team again. And just to bring it all back full circle, going to Draymond, Steven Adams, protect your Kiwis tonight. Phil, I will throw it back to you to wrap up.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us on this episode of Hoops Lounge Hangout here. Listen, this is our new format here. We're trying out a little blabster. So we'll be sending out links to live videos where you can thumbs up, thumbs down. I don't know if you need thumbs down on this. You can thumbs up whoever you thought brought the greatest information. And from all of us here, we're going to bring it to you all the time. Hoopslounge.com. Look for plenty more.